Hey guys, before we dive into today's amazing episode, I just wanted to share a free resource that we put together for you, the listeners of this podcast. To show my appreciation for you joining me on this beautiful journey to unleashing a life and a business of abundance, I put together the Millennial Mastermind Toolkit. This is a guide of the top 15 resources that I've discovered or been introduced to by guests, mentors, the mastermind group, or just stumbled across in my own journey. As you all know, there's a lot of stuff out there, but I've really narrowed it down through the thousands of hours of my own trials and tribulations to bring you this curated guide of books, podcasts, and mobile apps that have really made an impact on my life and my journey. You can find it at millennialmm.com/toolkit, where you can go ahead and grab it for free. So head over there, download the guide, and get moving towards your goals. Hello, folks. Welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast, the personal development community for entrepreneurial millennials looking for the tools, tactics, and inspiration to create the business and the life of your dreams. Today, we are joined by Tracy Timm in the Mastermind. Tracy is a quarter-life coach and a human capital advisor. She helps high potential professionals discover their career sweet spot through a mix of self-discovery, tactical training, and some much-needed tough love. She founded the Nth Degree Career Academy, a proven system that helps high-potential professionals define and discover work that they love. Her system is currently licensed by UT Dallas and implemented by Tracy and her growing team of certified coaches. Tracy has a degree in behavioral psychology from Yale. And Tracy, we're thrilled to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Woo! Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be really, really fun because oftentimes I work with people in a career who, they want the traditional, something stable, 9 to 5. And so we're looking for a great home for them. But I do have such a heart for people who want to start something and build something because that's what I've done in my own business. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for the conversation as well. I think that a lot of what you do and what you talk about is going to be super relevant to me and to our listeners. So I'm pretty excited to dive into it. But just to kick things off, I have to know, what exactly is a quarter life coach? What is your role and how did you come into that?
Yeah. So, I have to say, Brad, that it's a total labor of love because I had my sort of, dark night of the soul or whatever when I was 25 years old, because I had done everything right up into that, up to that point. I had, gotten the great grades in high school. I played the right sport. I did the extracurriculars. I volunteered, and then I got into a great college and continued to, do the right things and check all the boxes. And then even after college, I got the right job that made the right amount of money and had the right notoriety and status and lived in the right city. And all of that was supposed to lead to, what we've all been promised, right? Success equals happiness, you think. But I had everybody's sort of external definition of success, the being able to take care of myself, the money, the apartment, the taking care of my family, the whole bit. And I was miserable. I was miserable. Like it's so funny. I feel like my life now and my life back then are two different people in a lot of ways. And so when I started this business, which was several years later, I was really, not really several. It was only 2 or 3 years after that. My heart went to those people who did everything, quote unquote, right, checked all the boxes, got on the career conveyor belt, did what the responsible thing was, but just came up wanting. So I just started calling myself a quarter life career coach because my heart went directly to those people who were waking up in their mid 20s and 30s and going, holy crap, like I feel like I got sold a bad bill of goods and I am not happy here. And now I just don't know what I want to do instead. So that's probably the question I get asked the most often is like, what the heck is a quarter life career coach? Because, it's a very specific thing. But at the same time, I think people who resonate with that feeling, whether they're actually 25 or they're 35 or 45 or 55, I've been pretty successful in working with those people because they're ready to make change in their their life to live, to your, exact verbiage, a life and a career that they love and one that they dreamed about, and they're ready to take the necessary steps to do that.
So when you're working with these individuals, you mentioned that a lot of times it's those folks who are looking for the right 9 to 5 for them. Is that your target audience or your target clients that you typically aim to work with?
It's funny. It's not. I didn't necessarily go into it thinking that I would help people start businesses or that I would just help people find what they felt comfortable with. It really varies from person to person. So we've had people go through our digital program who wound up realizing that they needed freedom and flexibility, and part of their core values centered around actualization and independence. And so they wanted to either start their own thing or work as a consultant or work in sort of more of a contract type agreement with companies instead of being a full-time employee. And we've had some success. We've had a lot of success in that area. But then I've also had people who are like, no, I just want to love where I go every day. I want to love the people I work with. I want to feel like the company that I work with has great values and stands for something more. And I want to do meaningful, fulfilling work. And you can do that in a whole lot of different places. You can do that at, all the way at the nonprofit side of the spectrum to Fortune 500. Depending on what your values are and what you find to be the most important things in the workplace. So no, I didn't go into it with any intention of any specific outcomes for clients. I just want people to wake up every day feeling more alive. And if if when it comes to your career, you want to feel alive, those are the people that we serve the best.
Yeah, that's great. And I love just to dive into that process a little bit. So say you're working with a new client and they're trying to figure this thing out. They're going through the quarter life crisis. They're having that dark night of the soul. Where do you start with them? What are the questions that you ask to help figure out really what that passion is, or what type of work they would love and can really thrive at?
So that is the ultimate question, right? Is what is step one? And I remember when I, hated my job and had no idea what I would do instead, I was just so scared to get started because I had no idea where to start. And I only had so much energy at the end of any given day because I was spending all of it, trying to pretend to be happy and like I cared about what I was working on. And so at the end of the day, if you're going to do just one thing, you want to know that one thing is really going to move the needle, right? So now with our process, for the first 3 years of my business, I did all research and then all one-on-one coaching. And the whole goal behind the one-on-one coaching wasn't to build a coaching practice. It was actually to distill down, is there a proven or a continuity sort of strategy that I can distill from these conversations that I can then use with everybody? Meaning, is there a step one or is there not a step one? Is it different for everybody or is it similar? And what I realized after 2 years of doing only one-on-one coaching, every single person needed the same 5 steps, every one of them. And it took years to really distill this down. But when I did, I realized like, holy goodness, like there is literally a formula to finding your ideal job at any stage in life. So at that point I was like, well, I think I've just discovered something great that I could hang my hat on for a long time. So I named it the Nth Degree. It has to do with your limitless potential. And graduating in life in a new sense. So learning about yourself, having basically a degree in yourself as opposed to a degree in anything else. So we trademarked the Nth Degree as a process, and it's 5 basic steps. And they all start with the letter N because I'm a big nerd and I love words and I love wordplay. Right. So the 5 steps are now, nature, nurture, network, and navigate. And it's an evolutionary process. So you have to start at the beginning every time you do it. And you go through all 5 steps. And quite frankly, Brad, like I do this once a year with myself so that I can make sure that my business goals are aligned with who I am at that stage of life. And for most of us, about a year's worth of time is enough to adjust to a new set of circumstances. So maybe you got married in the previous year. Maybe you had kids. Maybe you, your big undertaking was that you got a dog or you finally moved into your own apartment. You don't have a roommate anymore. Or for a lot of your listeners, it's, wow, I think this entrepreneurship thing is on my heart. And so I'm going to have a whole new set of core values. And I think starting with now is the key for everybody, because this is the biggest mistake that I see people make when they decide they want to become entrepreneurs, or they want to change jobs, or they're miserable at the job that they have, is they go directly from, and this is our brain, right? This is why I love my psychology background and degree, is your brain is designed to solve problems quickly, whether or not those are long-term solutions. So your brain sees a problem, I hate my job. The solution is what? Get a different job, right? Like that's just A to B. So oftentimes we jump from problem to solution, and we start to go to solution-based activities like, okay, I'm going to look at job boards, or I'm going to update my website, or I'm going to optimize LinkedIn, or I'm going to talk to a recruiter, when in reality, we don't actually know what we're looking for, right? We haven't done the pre-work to make that work that we decide to do valuable. Because if you're looking on a job board and you don't really have any idea what you're looking for, that's like the seventh circle of hell. It's miserable, right? Like you're overwhelmed by everything you're looking at, and then you're simultaneously underwhelmed because you're like, well, none of this really feels good. None of this really fits me. So all of those activities in my mind are really, truly putting the cart before the horse. So the first step in the nth degree process is now. Where the heck are you right now? And there are 5 components to that first step. The first one that we do with everybody is a life audit. So let's just get out on the table everything going on in your life, good, bad, and otherwise. And I break that down into 8 different components. So, you've got your, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but you got social, spiritual, physical, emotional, financial, professional, right? All the different components of your life. And we just sort of put it out on paper, like what's going well, what could be going better. And really, we're taking stock. Where are you right now? And for most people that I work with, in fact, for everybody so far that I've worked with, that creates a foundation for the rest of the time that we work together. Meaning it's looking objectively at what you have going and realizing, oh, I probably have more going for me than I realized. And I'm going to use that as a foundation or a springboard to get to the next component, part of my life. But then we go through a pretty deep background. I call it a background check. It's really just looking at your whole life story and trying to figure out, how did I get where I am right now? Right. So we have the life audit. Where are you? The background check. How did you get there? And then the result of those things is setting with intention your current set of core values. And that is easily the most fundamental part of our process, is that seriously, what matters to you right now in this moment in time? Is it freedom? Is it security? Is it independence? Or is it collaboration? Is it love? Is it, accomplishment, right? It's really dialing into, who are you at this moment in time in your life? What do you value the most? And then I learned this from an executive, and I love this. Then we take our core values and we turn them into commitments. Because right, we all know this, we just don't admit it to ourselves, that your actions in life, your choices, dictate your core values. They tell the world what matters the most to you. They tell yourself what matters the most to you, where you spend your money, where you spend your time, who you spend your time with, right? All of that is a direct line to, what does Tracy or Brad or whoever value? But most of us don't set those intentions in advance. We just go through life and a lot of times go through the motions, and we allow circumstances to dictate our choices. So instead of doing that, if you want to change your life, if you want to start a business that has legs, that you care about, that you feel passionately and purposefully and intentionally about, then you have to define your core values in advance, and you have to set those core values as commitments, as intentions. So if one of my core values is freedom, then one of my commitments has to be not working at a 9-to-5, no matter how compelling their benefits are, right? No matter how excited I am about the number of days off that they offer, no matter what the salary that they're offering me is, because I know that if I take that job and it requires me to physically be in the office from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., then I'm not living that core value. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that the part that I find really interesting is figuring out what those core values are. I mean, the whole process is great, but when trying to dive into what is really at the essence of you and what's important to you, do you have any strategies that you use to work through that with your clients?
Yes. Okay. So I have a 1-hour exercise that I make everybody do in our digital program when they get to core values. And it's pretty simple. It's the 10, 20, 30 rule. So you spend 10 minutes just literally brainstorming anything that comes to mind. So if you're sitting there and you're like, oh man, I wish I had a boyfriend. Okay, well, that's something that came to mind. And what's the reason behind that? Is it because I want companionship? Is it because I want love? Is it because I want gifts? Like be really honest with yourself and figure out why you want the thing you want. And those are the values that you can distill from that desire. Does that make sense? So like if I'm thinking, so I just redid my core values in January. I do them every single year so that my business goals are aligned with who I am at that moment in time. So I'm literally looking at them right now because I always have them pulled up on my computer. Again, big nerd, and they're in a spreadsheet. Because this stuff takes work, like you said, it's not easy to do that deep dive of who am I really and what really matters to me in this moment. But this year, for instance, one of my core values really centered around other people. And that was actually a divergence from last year. It was all in. It was, not being the smartest person in the room and growing a great team and being around my clients in person more often and learning from them. And that dictated one of the things that we're doing this year as far as programs is that we've added retreats. Okay, let's get back to the 10, 20, 30. So the first thing you want to do is just 10 minutes of what you really want and desire and value at this moment in time. Anything that just comes to mind without having to think too hard. And that can be in any part of your life. This is not just professional because as you know, and as millennials, right, we all know our lives are blended with our work, especially when we become entrepreneurs. Because at that point, you don't have an hours, set number of hours that you're working. You are sort of on the clock all the time. And that changes your life big time. So for 10 minutes, just anything that comes to mind. Then for 20 minutes, look at a list of core values. There's a great one at literally corevalueslist.com. That's the one that I use. That anything that resonates with you, write it down. Like if the word spirit, just write it down. Wonder, write it down. Affection, write it down. Bold, write it down. Anything that just sort of resonates. And then at the end of 30 minutes, you're going to have a bunch of words and a bunch of phrases. And that's awesome because as you look at them and as a whole, you want to spend the next 30 minutes grouping them together. So this year, one of mine, which is really odd for me because I'm really much more of like a free spirit. One of mine had a lot of polish, poise, classy, elegance, finesse, graceful, strength, agility, beauty. And all of those things seem to come together in the way that I wanted to be living my physical life. Like, how do I want to look? How do I want to feel? How do I want to present myself? And I decided to call that core value Grace Kelly because in my mind, she was just the picture of that thing, right? And so there's no, I like to be really fluid with this kind of stuff and make sure that it resonates with people. Because if you call that core value, like if let's say I called it polish and polish didn't mean anything to me, I'm that much less likely to actually live by that core value. But because Grace Kelly resonates with me and I can picture her and I know exactly what that means in my mind, I'm like, hell yeah. So if I, get home late and I'm like, I don't want to go to the gym, or whatever, or I really want to eat that big block of cheese. I'm like, well, does that align? Would Grace Kelly do that? Right. And so I can kind of have fun with myself and live by that core value a lot more readily simply because I named it something that resonated with me. So at the end of 30 minutes, you should have, most people have somewhere between 7 and 13 sets of core values. I have 13 this year. Last year I had 14. Some of my clients come in with 7. The average number is usually around 10. And if you have a lot more than that, there's a good chance that you can combine them even more because you definitely don't want to be a slave to too many masters. But then the last step after the hour that you've spent brainstorming, then looking at a list of core values, then grouping your core values and naming them is that you want to put them in order. And that's like the crucial, we're getting into the nitty gritty stuff, right? But you wanted, to know exactly how we do this process. Putting them in order is the hardest part because they're all core to you. They're all valuable to you, but knowing what your first sort of like a waterfall, you know what I mean? So that when we turn them into commitments, then you actually have a litmus test for anything you're going to go out there and do. So let's say you want to go start a business and you have these core values and you've turned them into business commitments or life commitments. And let's say, so my number one core value this year was, I called it ethereal, because I have a faith practice. I'm Catholic. And so, a lot of the values that I wrote down were wonder and consciousness and faithfulness and belief and depth and connection and that sort of thing. So that dictates my life in a lot of ways, but in a business sense, it dictates the kinds of partnerships I'm going to take on, because I have a lot of integrity around, my business practices. It dictates my pricing. It dictates my business model in general. So these core values, turning them into commitments, really helps you, Brad, like make way easier decisions. Because let's say somebody came to me with this really lucrative idea, but they didn't practice their business with integrity. And I knew about that. Like, it'd be really easy and really tempting to just say, you know what, it's fine. Maybe they'll come around and I really need the money and it'd be a great partnership for the business. I'm just going to do it. But because I set my core values with intention ahead of time, I know that that doesn't even meet my number one value, let alone my number 13. So I can say no to that partnership and literally not lose an ounce of sleep over it. And that realization was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
So
That's huge, because I think that one of the biggest challenges within decision making is often not that there is a black and white answer. There's usually so many factors. And for example, you might be looking at the choice between working with two different people or taking two different courses of actions that are both good options, or reversely, both not great options, but you have to go with one and you have to figure out which is the lesser of the two evils or which is the best of the two good options. And having a structure like that is so powerful. I've experienced that in my own life. I love this, taking those core values and turning them into commitments. And I'm gonna borrow that from you.
Yeah, please.
I haven't done that process, but just having those core values that can really determine, okay, how can I look at this decision-making process and run them in order and say, okay,
yes,
here is what I determined is the order that I'm going to really use as my looking glass for things.
Yeah.
And when I'm making decisions, let's start at the top and work our way down. And that can be a very powerful tool. So
it's massive.
I'm glad you talked us through that. That's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm telling you, it's a game changer, and it just makes life easier because you've already done the hard work, right? Mm-hmm. Because if every opportunity that we're presented with, every business we could start, every job we could take on, right? We're bombarded with opportunity constantly. That is life, right? And if you don't have a system for evaluating those opportunities, then you're overwhelmed all the time. Like every opportunity you get, every job offer you get, every business idea that you have gets equal weight in your mind. And that's why so many of us are paralyzed with indecision, is that we're giving everything the same weight and the same value. But if you do all of this hard work on yourself ahead of time, and it doesn't have to take forever, it's like 1 to 2 hours of work. Do it on a Sunday. Like, when you have the Sunday scaries, this is the one thing you can go do that's actually going to move the needle for you, because then you have a system with which to look at the world and say, oh my gosh, like of this whole pie of things that I could do, this is my sliver. This is my space. Like, this is where I get to live and be super duper happy and be super intentional and on brand, as they say, is true to you.
Yes. So you turn those core values into commitments. Is there anything else within the now step that really that first step in this process?
Yeah, the last part now we've done 4 of the 5 things in that first step. The last part is what I call a reverse life audit. So instead of looking at your life as it is now, you look forward and you think about, based on your core values and your commitments and your decisions, right? What do I want my life to look like in the next year? What sort of goals do I want to set? How does this determine what my business plan looks like? How does this help me determine what type of relationships I pursue, where I spend my time, where I spend my money, what type of, it literally could impact every part of your life. So I do that in two different ways now. First, you can just go through the life audit process, which are those eight things that we talked about at the outset. And by the way, for your listeners, we're going to have all of this on a website that they can go look at. It'll be tracytimm.com/millennial. That way they can have these resources and easy to find. And I have a great life audit process and the core value process and the whole bit. So if they want that, don't stress if you're in the car. Like if you want to pull over and write it down, that's cool, but don't worry about it.
That's awesome.
But the reverse life audit is great because you can either go through the life audit 8 things and say, what do I want in each of these parts of my life? Or you could simply go through your list of core values and ask yourself, okay, in the next year, what does that look like? Is it a daily habit or activity? Is it a weekly thing you're going to commit to? Is it a big year-long goal that I'm going to need to break down over several months? Or is it just an ethos that I want to have throughout the rest of the year? So that forward-looking process is really valuable and helpful in just helping you determine where you are now and where you want to go. And it sets you up for success in the rest of the program as well.
Beautiful. All right. So now we've covered now. What are those other 4 steps, starting with nature, and how does the rest of this unfold then as we're looking at really diving deep into this process?
Yeah. And so if you're listening and you're thinking like, I want to get into entrepreneurship and I'm not necessarily sure the business I want to start or how I would start or where I would start, this process will work for you in the same exact way as it would work for somebody looking for maybe a more traditional or a steady kind of job. So it's evolutionary. So we take everything that we've learned and then we add it, into the next step, into the next step, into the next step. So the nature step is all about remembering who the heck you are. And quite frankly, it's the things that come naturally to you. So what are your behaviors, drives, motivations, gifts, talents? What are the things that you're good at without really trying, or the things that you've been rewarded for over time that you didn't even realize were special about you or were unique about you, or just truly innate to who you are? So we spend a lot of time in the nature component looking at some assessments for help, maybe, looking at your strengths, looking at your core behaviors, looking at your drives and motivators. And the whole idea here is that we want to set ourselves up for success by choosing a lane or a space or an industry or whatever where our gifts are strengths as opposed to liabilities. I think a lot of the struggle that people have is they think that they need to be successful at any cost in any industry at any job, when in reality, you could be successful if you work really hard at a lot of things, right? Like people that I work with all the time are so dynamic that the feedback that they get from the majority of their jobs is like, hey, you're doing a great job. We want you to stay. But they're miserable, right? They don't want to be there. So they're trying to figure out, how do I win at a game that I enjoy playing as opposed to winning at a game that I really have to work hard to succeed doing? And the visual that I always think of is there's this great video online, or this great image online of a cow and a dolphin jumping out of the water together, right? And it just gives you this idea that like a cow is going to be happiest and at ease and most successful in the environment that a cow was made for, just as a dolphin is going to be happiest and most successful and blah, blah, blah in an environment that the dolphin was made for. But if you take let's say you're a cow and you put yourself in the ocean, you might be able to swim and eat fish and learn how to speak to dolphins. But if you're constantly judging your success against a dolphin, they're going to swim circles around you forever, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to just get back to, who are you truly, deeply, and naturally, so that we set you up for success and put you in the right environment, as opposed to putting you in one that's setting you up for failure. And that's massively impactful for people because they realize the atrocities they've been committing against themselves for years by just trying to leg it out and work really hard in this one space, when in reality, like, let's say we look at animals, right? That seems obvious. Even when we look at athletes, like you would never take a baseball player and put them on a soccer field and say, well, because you're a professional athlete and this is a professional sport, you should be just as good at it, right? You would never even take a pitcher and a catcher and switch them. And that's the same sport. But we do that all the time professionally, don't we? We're like, I'm an entrepreneur and I started this business in this space and it went well, so I could be an entrepreneur in any space. And that might be true for some people, but it's a very rare athlete that can be that agile. So I think the goal is getting back to who we naturally are and leveraging those strengths and gifts and setting ourselves up for success as opposed to doing it the hard way.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Why push the rock up the hill when there's momentum in other areas of your life that can be complementary to your strengths and the things that you naturally gravitate towards? That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't achieve your dreams. It just means that there might be a more logical way that better suits you to go about it. So I think being strategic about that is damn smart.
Thanks. Yeah. And I think so too, right? Like in my life, I'm not saying that you don't ever want to address your quote unquote weaknesses or the things you could, your opportunities for growth, as they say, right? I'm not saying that at all. Those are things that you definitely want to address, and you want to surround yourself with people that, support you in those areas. But what I am saying is if you double down and focus on the things that come naturally to you, you might realize that you're an Olympic level athlete in one sport, but you've just been playing a totally different game. That's it. So that's the nature step. And you can use assessments for that. I have a handful of assessments that I really enjoy working with. And then we also do an exercise that I call the Oprah exercise. This one's great. It's very simple too, and it's very easy to execute. All you have to do is reach out to, and I challenge people to find 25 people in their life, because, if you invite anybody to anything, you're going to, end up getting 20 or 15 instead of 25. And you just ask them simply, what are the 3 best things about me? Like when you think about me as a person, as a whatever, friend, family member, etc., what do you think I'm best at? What do you think the 3 best things are about me? And it is so fascinating, Brad, when people get those results back. They come in via text, they come in via spreadsheet, they come in, via email, whatever. Every single time I've made somebody do this exercise, they literally only ever get 3 to 5 responses from people. That's it. Like every single person in their life, professional, familial, friend, etc., doesn't matter, sees the same thing in them. And sometimes for the first time, that person's going, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that was special. Or I didn't even realize that they knew that about me. Or isn't it kind of fascinating that all of these people and I have very different and diverse relationships with each other, but they all see these same gifts and talents within me. And that becomes really edifying and helpful in the self-discovery process when other people give you information instead of you just having to come up with it yourself.
Yeah, that could definitely be a very useful process for identifying these things and getting outside of your own mind for a second and letting other people help you.
Right? Isn't that miserable? Just the self-discovery process sucks. It's like doing open heart surgery on yourself.
Yes.
If you don't have a guide or somebody helping you along the way, it can be really painful. And a lot of people get stuck there. Right? A lot of people are like, I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know what I like. I don't know, whatever. Use any and all tools at your disposal. Use assessments. Use a coach. Get a guide. Get, if the nth degree process might work perfectly for you, but get help with the things that you need help on, and then move on to the next step. Like, I'm just all about action creates learning and information. And then when you have more information, you can make newer, better choices and more action follows, right? So that hopefully will get people unstuck in that part of the process.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense. So then moving on to nurture, what's that all about?
Yeah, so nurture is the exact opposite side of the same coin as nature. So I like to say whatever you put in that God left out. And the reason that this is really important is that now nature and nurture make up what I sort of identify as a triple Venn diagram that reveals a person's niche. Because your nurture is any learned skills, knowledge, expertise, experience, anything that you put in that you want to leverage going forward. This was a huge learning for me because my biggest fear my first job out of college was on Wall Street. And I spent 2.5 years working on a trading floor. And I was working specifically on a credit desk. So we were selling bonds and loans. And so I was learning things like bond math and reading balance sheets and income statements and P&L and, trying to figure out what good investments were. And I had a psychology degree. Now I'm a smart cookie. Like I could figure it out and I was good at math in high school, but like I hadn't touched it with a 10-foot pole in college. So it was, all these things that I was having to learn just to get by every day. And when I knew I didn't want to be there anymore, I was terrified because I thought I was going to have to start over. And this is a fear that I hear of a lot from the young professional community, what we're calling millennials at this point, is that, they are wildly fearful of starting their professional life over again, of being quote unquote behind everybody else and having to go back to square one. I remember deeply feeling that fear when I decided to leave Wall Street because I had no idea, A, what I would do next, but B, how I would ever leverage any of that time that I spent there because I had zero desire to be in finance ever again. Right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is I quit that job. I re-enrolled kind of in school and I actually went on a semester at sea, which if you're listening and you're not familiar with that program, it's an undergraduate study abroad program where you actually sail around the world on a ship instead of living in one place for, 4 to 6 months. And every time you get to a new destination, you get off and you travel there for 2 to 6 days. And then you get back on, you sail to the next place. And while you're on the boat, you take classes. And while you're off the boat, you just get to travel. It's like the most incredible experience ever. But it was great for me because I met some really wonderful mentors who were helping not only mirror back, kind of in the Oprah exercise-esque way, what I was naturally gifted at, but they also helped me to dig into my history, my education, my work experience, any like outside of work experience, and figure out what I could leverage from those experiences so that A, they weren't wasted, and B, whatever I chose to do next looked like a natural next step. And that was huge. Like that blew my mind because here I was throwing the baby out with the bathwater when in reality, like a direct line I can draw from that is I can now, as an entrepreneur, read my financial statements because I worked on a credit desk, for 2.5 years. Had I not done that, I would have had to learn all of that from scratch. And that would have been a very daunting, overwhelming thing to learn at the outset of trying to start a business. It's what some people will have to do, and that's fine. But it was one of the things that I could draw a direct line from a job I never want to do again to a job that I love and a career that is, my purpose, that I didn't have to feel like I had wasted all of that time, even though I was never going to do that job again. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's the goal there of Nurture is leveraging all of those experiences. And some of them are going to come from education. Some of them are going to come from work. And then a lot of them come from our other experiences, hobbies, travel, extracurricular activities. And the idea is to just mine all of your experience for those things that you can draw out that you want to keep, the things that you definitely know you want to get rid of, and any skills and knowledge and expertise that are now unique to you based on your experiences.
So we've got this process really coming into shape here. You've really plotted out where you're at right now in stage 1. You've looked at nature, what comes natural to you, nurture, what you can really develop and what skills you've worked on in the past. What's step number 4 from there?
Okay, so step 4 is where we go from internal to external. But before we can get there, because step number 4 is your network and leveraging your network properly, we have to make sure that we've come up with our niche. So we take those 3 ideas, your now, nature, and nurture, and the middle of that triple Venn diagram is your niche. And the way that I think it makes the most sense to understand is that it's what you were born for, bred for, and love. And what's fascinating about this is I always use Olympic athletes as examples of this because I'm A, fascinated by Olympic athletes, and B, they're a perfect manifestation of this process. Like let's use Michael Phelps, for instance. So Michael Phelps had to have the right now, the right nature and the right nurture to win a shit ton of gold medals, right? And I believe that we're all set up to be that Olympic gold medal athlete in some event. We just haven't properly identified what our event is yet. So you can see it very easily if you sort of reverse audit Michael Phelps's life, right? He had to have the right now, which means a lot of things. Born to the right family, in the right area. Part of his now, remember, core values and commitments. He had to be competitive. He had to like swimming. Like if Michael Phelps was born with the body he had and was given all the training in the world, aka the nature and the nurture components, but he didn't give two shits about swimming, he's not going to be the gold medalist, right? So he had to have all the right now, but then he had to have the right nature, right? His big old hands and his crazy broad shoulders and the long body, and then the competitive nature, right? All of that comes in. And then he had to have the right nurture, which is all of the practice over all of those years and eating the right thing and learning nutrition and whatever. So where all those three things came together meant that he was an Olympic level gold medal athlete at a very specific event. And we saw the manifestation of that, right? So what I'm trying to create for everybody that I work with and everybody that goes through this nth degree process, even if they're doing it without me, is that we need to identify what that niche is for you and not put so much pressure on it that it can never change, right? Because Michael Phelps wasn't just a gold medalist in one specific swimming event. You know, some years it was one, some years it was another one, some years it was another one. And now that he's done swimming, it's going to change completely, right? So for us, I mean, that's why the now phase is so important, Brad, because I think one of the biggest hurdles to people leaving jobs that they hate or starting businesses that are on their heart is that they think it has to be one thing. What is my one passion? What is my one purpose? What is my one intention? And our generation has put so much pressure on that idea that it's very debilitating and causes massive paralysis in people. Because you're like, well, if I don't know my one thing, what if I like these 5 things? Or what if I pick the wrong thing? When in reality, like, our life circumstances change all the time. Thus, our core values change all the time. And so my purpose right now in life might very well be tied to the business that I'm building. But hey, if I get married and have kids, maybe my purpose is going to shift a little bit because my core values have shifted a little bit. And honestly, I think maybe over the last 5 years, that epiphany right there, that it doesn't have to just be one thing, is easily one of the top 3 things that has given my life so much less anxiety and so much more ease and fluidity. And if you're thinking about starting a business, this is a great learning opportunity for you, because truly the business that you intend to build now and then what it looks like 5 years from now could be totally different, because you got 3 years in and realized, I don't want to build an empire. Like, I don't want to be the next Google. I really just want to work with 10 super talented A players and we get really good shit done, right? And then your business model is going to change. And your purpose is going to change and the intention behind it is going to change. But if you're not able to live with that sort of grace for yourself, it can be wildly debilitating and very anxiety ridden.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we figure out that niche, right? And then we move on to the external manifestation part of the program, which is the last 2 steps. So that's network and navigate. And the whole purpose behind those 2 things is your network is to build and leverage a group of dedicated career advocates, meaning I want to talk to people who want to go to bat for me or who want to help me in some way. So when I came out of semester at sea and I was like, well, I don't know what the hell I really want to do, but I knew because I had figured out my niche that I wanted to work with people, on people, and I wanted to be maximizing potential as opposed to getting people to baseline. And that looks very, so that might mean talent development or doing what I do now, right? As opposed to maybe being a counselor or a therapist or something of that nature, right? Some people have a heart for that. It wasn't my niche. It wasn't the right thing for me. But I had no idea what that looked like, right? You can't go into like a Google and say, I want a job where I'm working with people, on people, and I'm making people great. Like it's not a job title. It doesn't have role and responsibilities or whatever. So your network is there not only to get you to where you want to go, but they're also there to help you clarify where you want to go. What's it called? Who hires it? What does it pay? How do I make that number bigger? Right? Like all the pieces of the puzzle that you just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And the fun part about working through your network is that you're allowing other people to help you, which they genuinely want to do. And you're leveraging their collective expertise and taking a lot of the heavy lifting off of yourself, right? It's not you going on job boards now and trying to figure out where you fit in. It's you having really great dynamic conversations with people where you're sharing your niche, you're sharing how you got to it, and then you're sharing your vision for the future and asking them, what does that sound like to you? Do you know anybody who hires that? Do you hire that? Do you have experience in that area? What do I need to know to get into it, right? You're just leveraging the collective expertise of people in your sphere of influence, and you're allowing them to not only give you a gift, which people love doing, but also to talk about themselves, which people love doing, and to leverage what they know to add to what you haven't figured out yet.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about this all the time on the show, as with both mentors as well as mastermind groups and different sorts of structures that you can get this different feedback from, that and have really this group of people who is dedicated to you and you're dedicated to them. And it's a nice symbiotic relationship. So I'm glad that that's included in here.
Yeah, it was really funny when I was building the program the very first time around, which is probably a year and a half ago, when I was trying to really, really solidify what is this process? What are the 5 steps? Now, nature and nurture came to me like that. Those were the 3 things that I was like, this is the crucial part of this program. But then I realized it didn't really equip people to then go find these more unique and dynamic opportunities. And I reached out to somebody and was talking to them about this. And he's like, you've totally forgotten about the world. Like, you've made this all about them and all the internal stuff, when then they should be putting it in contact with other people, right? Because we all know, like, a plan is only as good as its contact with reality. Our idea of what our niche is only as good as how we can manifest it. And other people are so much better equipped to help you figure that out. So in our process, in the networking phase, I teach people the anatomy of a good networking conversation, exactly how to pitch your idea to people, how to make sure that you get something out of every meeting that you have. And then, to your point, how to grow an ecosystem of really high quality, I call them career advocates, but basically your professional support system that's going to go to bat for you, that's going to advocate for you, that's going to sponsor you, that might put you up for jobs, that might help you, if you're starting a business, might help you get some seed money, might help introduce you to investors, might introduce you to a business partner. Like, you just never know until you put it out into the real world, and you allowing other people to help you, which is another huge barrier that I see that people come up against, is thinking they have to go it alone. They have to do everything independently. When you and I both know, we don't accomplish anything alone, ever.
So true. All right. So now we have the network piece built into this. What is the final step, that navigate bit?
Yeah. So once we're building and growing and nurturing this network of career advocates, then we have to start actually taking action steps toward these ideal positions. So the navigate process is, how do I do that as efficiently and effectively as possible? I remember one of my biggest fears of, starting this business or even getting a new job or whatever was, what if I'm wrong? What if I think I've done all the research I can and I start it and I take this full-time job or I take this leap into a business and I'm 3 weeks in and I'm like, shit, I made a bad decision. Like, this was a bullet that I needed to have dodged, and what do I do now? Right? That's everybody's like nightmare scenario, is that they do all this work, they leave this job that they hated, they take all this quote unquote risk, and then they get into a job or they start a business or whatever, and they're now in a cage of their own making, let's say, right? So the navigate process I learned while I was on semester at sea, because we were working with the head of the design school, the D school at Stanford. His name is George Kemble. And he taught us what's called the design thinking process, which companies like IDEO and Google use to build products and services. And it's this sort of circular methodology that has 5 stages. and they're kind of interactive. So you begin with really empathizing with the problem and then defining what the problem really is based on that empathy, which is honestly the whole first part of the nth degree program. That's now nature and nurture. But then when we get to navigate, what we want to start doing is ideating around the solution. So if I've figured out my niche, what are all the possible manifestations of that thing? What are the industries, the jobs, the types of businesses, etc. But then the most crucial part is that you want to quickly prototype and test those ideas so that you can go back to the definition and the ideate process as quickly as possible to get to your final result. Now, if you're listening to that in the car, you probably just went, like, what did she just say? What that means is, let's say in your job, instead of taking a full-time position or going all in with all of your savings into a business idea, it's trying to figure out what are the ways that I can strategically test this idea without having to take all of the risk up front. So if you're taking a full-time job, then that might mean you just go shadow at that company for half a day and you figure out, wow, I would hate working here, or, oh my God, I love these people, right? Or you could do an informational interview with somebody who works there and somebody who already does the job that you want to do and ask them what their frustrations are. Ask them what they like and don't like about the business. Ask them if they would take the job again, right? So it's all these different ways of very small, very easy, very low risk ways of testing out your idea. So let's say you're a business, you want to start a business. This is the best example I've ever heard. And they gave this to us when we were on semester at sea. There was a guy who, I think he was somewhere in Israel, I want to say Jerusalem, and he realized that there were no bikes anywhere. He was like, this would be a gorgeous city to bike in. I can't believe nobody has, there aren't, public bikes around. And so he's like, oh, I could start this amazing business where we have public bicycles and they're for rent and and it'd be awesome, right? So he goes to an investor. He's like, I want $100,000 to start this bike business. I think it's going to be great. And the guy said, I will give you $10,000 and I want you to do one thing with it and then come back and tell me how it goes. He's like, I will save you so much money by doing this one thing. And he's like, okay, what is it? He's like, all I want you to do, actually, no, didn't give him any money. And he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to the Kinko's down the road and I want you to print out, 100 flyers that say bike share program coming, call with questions or interest or whatever. And I want you to post them all over the city. So this cost him, maybe $100 and a couple hours of his time. Right. So he goes all around the city and he puts up these bike share things and he's goes home and he sits by the phone. In 2 weeks, he got 2 calls. No interest whatsoever in this idea, right? So he goes back to the investor. He's like, nobody called me. What did I do wrong? He's like, you didn't do anything wrong. Just nobody wants what you're selling, right? There's no market for it. And instead of taking $100,000 and going all in and buying the bikes and putting them out and only to find that nobody wanted them, he figured it out with this really small minimum viable prototype and test that saved him a bunch of money and a bunch of time. So if you're thinking about starting a business and you've gone through this whole now, nature, nurture process and you're talking to your network about all the ideas that you have and you want to start putting some of them into practice, how can you strategically test those ideas in a very simple, we call them MVPs, minimum viable product kind of way. And as you, continue to ideate, prototype, test, go back to redefining, ideate, prototype, test, you can do that in your career. You can do that with a business. You can do that with a product. And it's just a really fascinating way to get to your end result, which is the business you really want to start. Much faster and without as much risk as you might take on otherwise.
I love it. So Tracy, this episode's been packed with a ton of valuable content. We've got some great steps here. I know you mentioned that a lot of this is going to be available at tracytimm.com/millennial for our listeners. Is there anywhere else that you would point audience members to learn more about you and what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, if this resonates with you and you think that you might be a good fit for this process and you want to come to one of our retreats or you want to and perhaps even enroll in the digital program, which is 8 weeks long and it's group coaching and it's intense and awesome, then the best first thing you can do is go to tracytimm.com/clarity call to book some time with me. And I want to make sure that that's the right website. So I'm looking it up right now, but I'm pretty sure So it's tracytimm.com/clarity, just the word clarity, CLARITY. And you can get time on my calendar right on that website immediately. You'll get a free 1-hour call with me and we can talk through what's going on in your business, what's going on in your career, and see if you're a good fit for any of the programs. So that'd be the first place I would go. If that's kind of like a little overwhelming or too much for you at this point, then you can go to tracytimm.com and there are a ton of resources there. We have a Jumpstart Your Career Mastermind. We have a Career Clarity Starter Kit. There's another opportunity for you to book a call. And then you can also look into our individual programs. So tracytimm.com/retreat and all the other nth degree programs as well. So that would be where I would recommend people get started. But if you know this is on your heart and this is something that you've been struggling with for a while and you just want a clear framework and strategy to work through, then I would highly recommend you go and avail yourself of one of the hours on my calendar, which is tracytimm.com/clarity.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for going through this process. I think that people are going to be able to take a lot of different pieces from this and apply it to their own lives. And yeah, definitely recommend that people check out your website to learn more and contact you if they are interested in going through it, because clearly you have a lot of information and experience going through it. So Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and sharing your process with us.
Brad, you're wonderful. You're creating such a great home for people who have something bigger on their heart and something they want to put out into the world, and they don't want to do it in a vacuum. They want to do it among a community of like-minded people, and people like you build those spaces, and the world is better for it. So thank you so much for the honor of having me, and I just look forward to getting to know you better and your audience better and serving you however I can. So thank you so much.